Okay. All right. Good afternoon. Welcome to the breakout session number 6. I'm Jonathan McDowell with the LCP team and with AECOM. And today we're going to review the presentation, cover the mainline structural viaduct types and other context-sensitive structural considerations. Bridge expert Brian Johnson will be leading the presentation, but this is an open dialogue, so everyone, you can freely speak as you have comments as we roll through the presentation. It's a focus group, so for the Lafayette Connector Advisory Group. So you'll be specifically unmuted for this session, and this of course is all being recorded. Brian and I, along with other present DOTD members and LCP team members, will be able to answer your questions. All public participants who've joined us today will be muted in order to avoid distraction and focus on the committee's discussions. We do want to note that although we'll do our best throughout the presentation to answer all the questions that you have, there's some questions that we may have to hold to the closing main session, and some of that's due to time, some of it's due to just there may be somebody else that's in another session or part of the team that's better acquainted with the topic. So there's also 2 bridge experts that are part of the LCP team that'll be floating in and out of the rooms to also help answer any questions that may come up that's specific to today's focus group. So once we conclude here, we'll meet back in the main room and discuss, with all of the other committee members' inputs out of our time together. So there's only 9 to 10 committee members present here, but please be respectful of everyone by taking turns and trying to stay on topic as much as possible. This will help for a productive discussion in our limited time today. So Brian, please take it away.
All right, thanks, Jonathan, and thanks everyone for joining us today and going through some of this bridge information on the I-49 connector project. We appreciate everyone's input. So I wanted to keep this a little informal, but did everyone get a chance to attend the meeting on Tuesday and listen to Gary's presentation and follow along? Was everyone able to do that? Yes, I see Sherry saying yes. Okay, well, this is really the end of the presentation that he did, and the last part that he talked about was the feedback forms. So we broke these feedback forms out, and we just kind of wanted to go through each section and talk about each one of the items on the bridge. And just have an open dialogue and talk through it. And if you got questions about any of the structural elements or anything, we can do that. And then we have a few other things that we wanted to kind of cover. But first, I wanted to start with the feedback forms. So just to get familiar with the feedback forms, and I'm not sure if anybody has filled these out. Maybe. But to get familiar with it, you've got a grading scale for each of the items, and then you can list some additional comments in there. So we'll get started with the first one, which is the girder type. So as Gary did on Tuesday, we went through 3 girder types. One was the LG girders, which is the traditional I girder beams that we see a lot through Louisiana. The second girder type is an LU girder, which it's still a pre-stressed girder similar to the LG, but it's a little different shape. And then you've got the segmental girders, which are built differently in different sections. So with that, I was just gonna see, does anybody have any questions? Anybody have any comments about it? Is everyone off of mute? Jonathan?
I think so. It looks like everyone is off of mute.
Okay. Any strong opinion about which girder type would be selected for the structure?
This is Bob Mahoney. I guess I want to get a handle on the role that whenever we make comments in the breakout room, are we talking as an individual or representative of some organization, or how's the input going to be taken and looked at?
My understanding is it's being taken as a you know, as a member of that organization. You know, the different members of the LCAG organization is made up of you know, supposed to be representatives of each organization. So so it's not necessarily speaking for that organization specifically, but it is.
That's my understanding as well, Jonathan, a representative of an entity.
Here, based off the presentation that Gary had done on Tuesday. And we can go and look at it. Let's see, I've got the virtual room up here. Give me a second.
But it wouldn't let me do that. When it's kind of highlighted, it's giving you.
Let's see.
There.
Yeah, so you've got y'all can see my screen, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, you can see the virtual room and everything. So.
That's the way you do it. But if you take out that travel hours, thing.
So anyway, this is the LG girder. This is the LU girder. And there's the SG girder. And then we looked at raising the structure, but so is there, I mean, out of everyone here, do you have a preference on the girder or neutral about all of them? Or indecisive?
Mm-hmm.
Well, this is kind of why I asked the question earlier. It sounds like for me, Federal Highway, I'm going to be neutral on everything and just be
Tom Salmon, you looked like you were talking, but you were on mute because I thought I heard some background noise. If you could repeat what you were saying.
Yeah, it seems to me the SG girder is the smoothest and has most continuous. The other ones seem to be, if I was underneath them, seem to be more busy. It's the SG girder for me. It seems to be the cleanest. Although when you're looking at those, they're all very monumental. There probably needs to be some more design that's applied to the girders to reflect the specialness of the community. whether that's sort of imprints or we've seen a lot of examples through the years, how those could be marked with special cultural markings. Me, the SG girder, because it looks like the most inviting. I wanted to be underneath.
Yeah, I mean, the SG girder does have a cleaner look, and you know, one of the you know, we looked at different several different aspects when we were coming up with the 3 different girder types. You know, each one of them has pros, each one of them has cons. You know, so taking all that into consideration, when you look at it visually, yes, it looks much cleaner. But then when you take into account cost and, you know, other things, and I'm not sure, is that a feedback form, Scott? About, no, it's just the look, I guess. But if you remember from the presentation, we had different, let's see. Yeah, so we had different category criteria, evaluation criteria for each one. And, you know, so when you look through here, and it's not to say that red is bad, it's just not as good as the other option. But when you go through here, the SG girder is a costly one, but yes, from a look standpoint. And, you know, as far as the aesthetic printing and stuff that you were talking about, Tom, you know, that's kind of the next step, I guess. I mean, the first step is to try to nail down what we're going to do on the girders and the rails and everything, and then we'll look at doing some enhancements. It's kind of tough with girders, but these little pieces here at the vents and the rail and stuff like that, we can really make those pop with some aesthetics. It's kind of a challenge with the girders.
And the piers as well are opportunities. Yeah.
Right.
More so than just the girder itself. Yeah.
Right, which I think is the next one. So I wanted to go to the next one and talk about the different pier types. Do any of these stand out as being more favorable than the other one? I mean, you got this is almost a traditional pier, and then it has an inset. Here you've got an opportunity for some architectural piece there. And then these others, it's really just the shape of it. But out of the 4 options, does anyone really see one that kind of pops and stands out to where that would be the choice of substructure?
I would say,
Can there be a variety through the project, or does it have to be all one or another? There may be some areas where one type of column might fit in better with whatever the anticipated use is.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we've got a long stretch of mainline viaduct, right? So certain areas that are more visible, maybe we do something that's more aesthetically pleasing, and then in areas that aren't as visible, maybe we do something a little more standard, cut down on some cost or something like that. So I think there's plenty of opportunity to be able to change the appearance of the piers as you go along the viaduct.
I think that's a good point, because at certain exit or interchanges for certain major roads, such as Johnson or markings on those columns could have an important impact to the cultural enhancement to the place.
Right. Right.
To me-
And I'm sorry. But you know, I mean, it's like if you pick the like say this option 2, and I mean we haven't done an evaluation on the cost, but let's say you pick option 2 at some of those major interchanges, right? But you wouldn't want to run that all the way through to increase that cost, right? So definitely have an opportunity to look at a mixture of substructure, like you said.
When we start talking about mixtures on the columns, would it be appropriate to be able to have a mixture of the girders? Areas where you might want to have more openness, go to the SP thing. Maybe more economical one on straightaway sections.
Yeah, and that's I think that's coming in our next phase. You know, the first phase we strictly looked at one type across the whole corridor, and our thought as the design team, we've always thought that it may go that way. It may go to where we identify sections along the main line and say we're going to have the more enhanced aesthetics and girders and everything else in these areas, and then maybe in other areas. But you know, that will also play into the cost of everything. You know, I think we have enough structure that we could break it up into long enough pieces to bring the cost down. You know, so we would have to do that evaluation on things too. You wouldn't want just 2 or 3 spans of the SG girders, you know, because that would get pretty expensive. But if we had a good stretch of it and then a good stretch of, say, the LG girders or something like that. And you know, that's some of the input, I guess, that we're trying to get from y'all is what are some ideas is or what do we think is going to be pleasing? What, you know, it's got to be pleasing to the public, but it also has to be constructible and cost effective too, right? So so is there any strong opinion about any of these, or they all kind of look like aesthetic columns?
Well, I'm drawn to option 2 and 3. Option 2 because you can certainly, you could probably do that for all of them with these precast members. How do you get special markings on there? Option 3, if you want a more clean, kind of more contemporary look, that also may be an option.
Yeah. Okay. Anybody else? All right. Well, we'll move on to the next item is the structure height. So as I had in the virtual room, and I'll go back to that because you can kind of see it a little better, where you go from, so this is the 22 feet of height, and then you have the comparison of the 30 feet of height. Now, obviously, when you go to 30 feet, things get to be a little more expensive. I mean, the columns get a little taller. The design of the columns is a little more challenging, but you know, and then like Bob was saying earlier, I mean, it may be an opportunity where we can do 30 feet in some areas, but then do 22 feet in other areas. But we just wanted to get everyone's opinion on the two different heights. And I think there's a couple of slides. There are some slides in here about the height. When you talk about light penetration under the bridge, you can kind of see the schematic there of the different girders. And then of course, if you raise it up, it would just increase the amount of penetration under the girder. So
I would say definitely in the urban core, we would like, 30 feet in the SB girders to maximize the amount of light under. So hopefully try to activate that space one day.
okay.
I would agree with Warren. I'm late to come into the meeting. I apologize, but I do agree that increasing the height of the connector piece near the urban core, in particular near the Macomb, Vise, and Freetown neighborhoods, would allow for more activation underneath the structure in the near future, preferably near future.
Preferably the near future. Well, Tina, I didn't know if you wanted to, we had a little bit of discussion on, and I didn't know if you wanted to say anything about the girder types. We kind of talked about the girder types, and if you had any opinion on that, and also on the pier types. We had the feedback form on both of those. So I didn't know if you wanted to say anything about that, or just are you going to move on, or?
Well, I do have a couple of questions about the girder types. How, like, did we talk anything about like the sound underneath those structures? Is any of that mitigated across the different types? So for instance, is the LG girder louder than SG girder when you're standing underneath it?
There hasn't been a whole lot of, well, there's no guidance, there's no guidance to say that this superstructure type or this girder type is louder with traffic running across it than another girder type. I can't imagine that it would be much different. I saw that Steve just joined us. So Steve, maybe you can chime in, but the question is, from Tina was, is there a difference in noise beneath the bridge depending on which girder type?
Not for these structure types. Mainly where we generate noise in bridge structures is in the joints on the deck. And within these systems, these three systems, the joint spacing is very similar. The other thing that helps with sound attenuation is just concrete material. So these structures, as opposed to a steel superstructure, steel beams or steel boxes, that structure would potentially generate more noise than any of these three. So on the scale of sound attenuation, it can be assumed that these three will perform similarly.
Okay. Well, without having like any robust discussion really with my group just yet, we're still trying to figure out how to get this information to everyone where they can provide feedback. But I personally prefer the SG girder as the design, mainly because it's less spaces, as y'all mentioned earlier, and it provides for more programming opportunities for murals and other cultural activities underneath the bridge that we may want to hinder from potential graffiti artists having other faces. So it just provides more programming opportunity from a community perspective for beautification aspects. Could we go to I guess the style of the pier types.
Pier types, yeah.
I kind of like, I mean, I don't know. I like the option 1 and option 2 and option 3. I worked in the planning department when Mike Ollier was talking about crawfish carotids on underneath the interstate. So I'm all about any kind of artistic expression, especially locally that we can have on these. But I definitely, I don't think that we should make it a caricature situation. But I like the idea of being able to add different cultural aspects underneath the bridge basin. And also just from a programming standpoint, flat surfaces are always good. So I like option 3 because of that.
Yeah, and you know, we had some discussion before you got on, Tina, about you know, and this goes into the next phase of the study of the viaduct, but there may be an opportunity to where we can use like an option 2 with some you know, some aesthetic feature, and then maybe switch to an option 3 when we're not in some of these interchanges. You know, Bob from FHWA, he mentioned that earlier, that, you know, can we change types and stuff like that? And that's some stuff that would go into the next phase of the study.
Okay. Well, I do like that opportunity, especially like at major corridors where it intersects at like the Johnson and Jefferson Street, and that being kind of an addition to a gateway almost, even if it's under a connector. So I like that kind of idea, and I know that's the next phase, but that's my thoughts. Yeah.
Okay. Good. So when you jumped in, we were talking about the vertical clearance, and I think we had some comments about same opinions. Some of the intersections having the taller clearances, and in less visible areas, I guess we would do like the 22-foot vertical clearance. Any other opinions on the vertical clearance?
Just if it's consistent, let's keep it a consistent length. So if we can decide on I don't know if it's we can do 26 feet versus but I think just looking at it from making sure we get the right light in particular the communities and the neighborhoods that's going to be surrounding the connector, making sure there's as much free and open air as possible underneath there, I think is a good thing. So I lean more, I guess, towards the 30-foot consistently. But if you can find some, I guess, good space where it's not that it seems as though it's lower in areas where people may not be looking. We want to make sure everybody's looking everywhere. We want to increase safety as much as possible. So if we can find some kind of consistent something, as I said, like a middle ground, I think would be good for the whole connector, or, you know, just trying to figure that out. I don't know.
Right.
I would add, I do like, I mean, we are sort of prisoners of your images because they're taking it ground level. One of the things that we want to think about is if we make it 30 feet, we really want to increase the monumentality of it. That's already big. It's going to be this concrete ribbon that separates our city. And do we want to make that even more massive by the height? It's just something to think about in terms of scale. I like the openness underneath, but I also, when you start to step back, and you compare the 30 feet to something like St. Genevieve Church, it's almost as big as that. So it's gonna you know, dwarf most dwellings in our city. So monumentality of it, you got to kind of weigh both of those things. It's going to be a big boy. So do we really want to make it bigger? It's just a question I'll throw out there.
It might also be more visible further out into the community because it is higher above the tree line as well. Something to consider.
Right. That's a good point, though. Okay. Anybody else on the height before I think we move on to,
On the height, it seemed like at one time there was concern on the historic district, Sterling Grove, about the view of the structure. And this dialogue that just took place kind of touches on that a little bit about, do you make it bigger and higher and more obtrusive to the view from the historic district? There's a lot of balancing that appears to have to take place, what part of the project you're in and where you might desire some of these features.
I agree with Robert.
Yeah, Robert, Steve Boudreau, that's a very important point, and I think Mr. Salmons was talking through that. Cross-sectionally, this north and south portions of this viaduct, over 150 feet. So it's very tremendous in scale. So in the future CSS processes, as we talk through integrating this in the various communities, I think that's an important point, whether higher is better and what impacts it has to the adjacent properties.
All right. Anything else before we move on?
Hey, I just want to add, I'm listening to all the height, and Tina, I was just, thinking about your comment, and one thought would be, you were talking about the safety, and it sounded like you felt like you might feel safer with a higher structure. So, maybe some of those concerns could be addressed with lighting under the structure. If, once you see the scale of this and how far out people see it. I did like your comment about the consistent height. I thought that was very thoughtful, but lighting might address some of your concerns. So I just want to put that out there.
Thanks, Sherry. All
Thanks,
right.
Sherry.
All right.
Okay. We'll move on to the abutment options. So for the mainline viaduct, we'll have, the abutment at the south and the north end of the project. And as Gary kind of went through each one of these options, these are 3 different textures. So just kind of wanted to open the floor and see, does anyone have a strong opinion about one or none of them, or a mixture or something different? Or any questions about it?
Where are these abutments going to be at?
It's when the structure comes down to the ground. So south end, close to the airport, I guess, and then at the north end, close to I-10.
And then possibly the ramps, I guess.
That's true. Yeah.
Yeah,
Right,
that's true.
at the ramp. Yeah.
Yeah.
And those areas will definitely have walls, or is it possible to have embankment, or?
I think that most of the ramps that we've looked at to date, I think most of them have walls. So you will have a retaining wall system. Some of them are shorter than others, and it really depends on where it is. And I don't remember the whole layout of where the longer walls are, but
With the current alignment that we are working with right now, many of the tall walls have been eliminated. Probably the most robust walls that we have in the alignment right now would be at University. Because that right now it's somewhat a depressed section to respect the flight paths from the airport. But as Tim mentioned a few moments ago, yeah, this is University. That's a view at their turnaround and into the intersection.
Yeah, that's kind of the three different options, like Steve said, at University.
So these aren't like exactly what they would look like. I'm very clear on that. But how flexible are we with the design of these the walls? So like the imagery, for instance, like if for instance we wanted a crawfish crab, like something on the wall, is that something that's possible?
You can have it here. And the flexibility of these walls is the walls are in the structural terms, it's called modular walls, and they're made up of panels. So within the casting of these panels, we can introduce form liners with a multitude of different images. So in answer to your question, yes, there's quite a bit of flexibility for creating that cultural image that the community would like.
So my next question is how much do we value paying for culture in our community? Enough for our interstate. I mean, it's beautiful. What I'm saying is we're asking to make decisions on things, and I'm looking from it at a beautification. What could happen if we had to deal with this interstate in our community? But you know, the things that we say that we think are important as far as culture in our community and recognizing our historic districts and the significance of those things, how high in the priority list will beautification things like this be in the design costs?
So I guess, Steve, she's asking how expensive would it be? Is it in general?
Well, how expensive would it be? And well, we know that just adding the detail to these things, that if we added an image, all of those lines, every time any kind of cutter has to do anything, that adds to cost. So we know that if the community says they want more beautification initiatives, DOTD has historically done, you know, concrete. That is it. There's not a lot of beautification that goes on with the designs. So I'm just asking if there is a beautification aspect or a cultural aspect that the community would like to see happening underneath and within this structure, how will that be prioritized within the decision making for this connector? Will it be like kind of that low hanging fruit type situation where it could go out, oh, you know, if we have a lot of money, we can do it?
I want to be careful in not going too far out of bounds on this, but in what this workshop is discussing, and these are the structural elements, the bridges and these walls. I will say with these walls, there is a lot of variability, a lot of aesthetic features that can be incorporated into these panels for very little cost. Because it is essentially, it's just a form liner that's in the forms, a neoprene form liner that can be reused. So once the imagery is created, it just gets repeated in those concrete panels. So in relation to that particular element of the project, there can be a beautification factor for very little cost. I don't know if that answered your question.
I think it's close enough, because I feel like it's a conversation that we're going to continue to have about this structure, and about how things are funded and who's responsible for that funding and how quickly that funding will be activated.
Yes, ma'am.
It's a continuing question. So just keep it on the list and consider that when y'all have responses, I guess.
Yeah, wall aesthetics are very, it's possible,
Yeah, that's correct, Tim.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, if you look at some of those images, and if you could go back to one of them, look at that car. I think in the one that's, you have the image of the car pulling around on the ramp.
Oh, okay, yeah. We get to
At university?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, let me get to it.
I mean, it goes back to this discussion of scale. Look at the size of that wall versus the car, and anything you can do to help break down that mass, and just that, like you're talking about, Tina, Preach. I think it's very important that you, every time we have a chance to break down the mass, this thing is huge. It's going to be a monumental ribbon that goes through our community. And the more ways we have to break down this incredible monumentality, to bring that back down to the scale of the human, is going to be in the best interest of the community. I mean, look at that car. Look how tall that wall is. It could be somewhat accurate, but you're looking at a wall that's almost, what is that, 40 feet, and it's the texture that's going to break down that monumentality. Anytime we can do that on piers or on bridge decking, I think that's important. With that, or landscape, I agree with everything you're saying, Tina. Just that and I mean, I would go back and keep talking about cost. What's the cost if we don't do it? How does it impact the communities that abut that and surround that? Would you want to be next to that every day? That's brutal. So how can we make it a much more inviting element for a pedestrian, or even somebody in an automobile?
That's very true, Mr. Simmons. And here at university, I think with the geometrics that are being looked at right now, the height of the wall may be a little bit lower than this, but as we get into more of the CSS and the community context, there are also opportunities to tier these walls and create a little more interest. Anytime we can create multiple lines and setbacks, it does create a little more interest. And those things are not very cost intensive, but it's just part of this input process. Your points are very important in terms of the magnitude of these structures and how they integrate with whatever settings we're in. And of course, university is going to be different than historic downtown. Each one will have its own importance.
And Steve, this is Steve Wallace. I was going to chime in on that. And Tom, you're aware, I mean, this is right next to the airport. And so we're, one of the things we want to do is get specifically with the airport and try to see if they have any thematic elements from the airport that they want to incorporate to this area. If that's something that needs to speak the same language as well. But we realize that this is next to the airport and those two things may need to be consistent. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that is true.
Very much so. When you think about that, that's probably the entry gate for a lot of people when they come and they land at the airport. They're being first introduced to Lafayette. This becomes the gateway element into the rest of the city. It's a marker. So
right.
Those people that just from out of country or out of state, out of cities, they come in this way, take a cab into the city. This becomes an important gateway into not only the city, but also the university. They want to talk to university as an important marker in the University Avenue. leads into the university.
That's a great point. Definitely.
Yeah.
Well, that was good discussion on the aesthetics, on the abutments. But while I was trying to see, and you can kind of go across the virtual room here, and you can kind of see where some of the ramps come down. It's kind of fuzzy a little bit, but so that each one of these ramps where it comes down will probably have something similar as far as an abutment and a retaining wall. And like Steve said, I think most of the long walls have been eliminated, and we've got some short walls in some of the areas. But so that's something to consider too. Is each one of these ramps will have the abutment. So. All right, are we ready to move on to the barriers? We want to talk about the barriers real quick, since we're on the topic of aesthetics, and barriers are a little more challenging to see, but you can see there's different designs on the back. So any questions on that? I think that's just a painted one. This has a rustication look, and that's some kind of a geometric pattern there. So any questions or discussion about that?
And Brian, just dimensionally, these barriers are on this project will be 36-inch tall.
Correct. Yeah. So the barriers are 36, and this inset is probably about 2 feet.
Yeah.
Maybe 2.5. So any strong opinions, disagreements? Neutral?
Just in general, I think what I'm hearing from the conversation is that opportunities to make patterns, what that pattern is, that's specifically to the district or region, I think that's important. Whether it's a crawfish or land or all kinds of other cultural significant objects. It's one way to get the community involved in designing them.
Yeah, one of the things I'll speak to, Tom, you mentioned several spots of trying to find a way to decrease the scale, decrease the monumentality of the structure, and this is just another opportunity. By it kind of breaks up that thickness of the girder and the barrier, but having an opportunity to do something within that strip, just kind of rather than having that solid structure that comes all the way down, it introduces an opportunity there to still do an accent, and my understanding is the cost of this is similar as well. It's not a huge cost to do that along the back of the barrier. So.
That's correct, Jonathan. This is another application for form liners where they're introduced into the slip form, and for very little cost create imagery on the fascia of the bridge.
I like any opportunities for beautification. and non-monumentalizing of the structure.
Yeah.
And I think all three of these options would create that, whether we did a painted surface or some kind of texture finish on the backside of the rail. I think, either of these options would kind of break that up like Jonathan was speaking to.
I also want to add that I don't want to see a bunch of crawfish all over this interstate. So I just wanted to add that.
You don't want to see little crawfish running this way, along the rail?
Well, no, I don't mind crawfish. So if we ever wanted to have a I-49 crawfish ball, I'm always down. But it was just an example because I worked in planning and that was, we always talked about crawfish carrot tits, but that's what came to my head when we were talking. But it's
Right.
really, so the design aspect of it and the beautification. And as Tom said, it would be a great way to get the community engaged in this project and this plan and actually have some ownership in it, because right now it lives very much so in the DOTD hands and in the city of Lafayette's hands, and it's not in the community's hands. So I think it would be really good to help bridge that with those beautification aspects.
That's very true, Tina. And I think as this process begins to evolve and we begin integrating the CSS process, is one thing that as we drive along the outside of the structure, there's opportunity to create those eyeline imageries that flow through the structure. And it helps to minimize the monumental scale of these structures. So it'll be fun to go through those exercises and create the imagery that the community wants. And we got it loud and clear. Crawfish is not on the menu.
All right. We got a couple more items. We kind of talked about the retaining walls already. But is there any other comments about the retaining walls that we want to talk about? I know we've talked about it a good bit. I think it occurs at University and one, is it in another location, Steve? I can't remember.
This is the greatest magnitude of wall along the viaduct is at University. And the other areas, it probably is maybe 25% the scale of these in terms of wall area and heights.
Yeah, and it's mainly where the ramps come down.
Correct.
Yeah. So I know we had good discussion on the retaining walls earlier, so wasn't going to spend too much time on that. And that's kind of the feedback form. Does anybody have any questions about any of the criteria as far as maintenance of traffic or the construction cost or any of those items we want to go back through and talk about a little more?
Hey, Brian, you may want to pull up the evaluation matrix part, the red, yellow, green, so people can see the criteria.
This?
No, I think you go back. There's a in the presentation, I think.
On the presentation?
Yeah, there's kind of a summary that shows you showed a little bit earlier.
Yeah, this one here.
Yeah, that. There's also another one that has more stuff in it.
Yeah, this one.
That one. Okay, yeah. Okay.
Talking about the maximizing.
Oh yeah, that's the gird. Yeah, just the girders.
That's just the aesthetics.
Specific to the girders. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, and then these are the three main criteria that we looked at was construction cost, MOT, and aesthetics. So just wanted to see if anybody has a strong opinion about which one is important to them, which one you have questions about, if you have questions about all three or none, or just kind of open it up and see what y'all want to talk about here. Is there one that, Tina, I know you've been pretty active in the call. Is there one of the criteria that you feel is most important? I know we've talked a lot about the aesthetics, but is there, you have any comments on the cost or the maintenance of traffic?
Well, I think this interstate is going to be expensive no matter how much we talk about it. So I think it's going to be something that we all are going to have to bite the bullet on paying for, whether it comes or not. But as far as moving traffic, and with the railroad, I'm not sure if we talked anything or if we will be talking about that conflict there. But when the railroad passes, it shuts down Johnson Street. It shuts down any street that intersects, and Jefferson Street becomes the one tunnel that everyone tries to run to. So for me, height, of course, I'm going to always say the SB because of height, and I think it just looks nicer than the other girders. It hits all the green boxes for me as far as traffic and aesthetics, but the cost is going to be what it is. It's going to be an expensive project. Anyone else?
Anyone else?
So Tina, this is Steve Wallace. Were you able to talk to some folks in your neighborhood between Tuesday and today?
Well, yeah, I did actually talk to my board briefly, but not anything major in the community. But that's one of the things is that it doesn't move probably as quickly in the community world as it does in the professional world virtually. So it's right. We're trying to figure out how best to get the feedback that's needed for this. And if any feedback is needed. So, I mean, that's an honest question to put out there. So right. It's been difficult to mobilize, but my board is now.
Good. Well, again, if you get some more feedback and you want to share that with us, workshop number 2, when we start that in a month or so, you'll have an opportunity to do that. So appreciate you reaching out to them and gathering that input. It's crucial.
Okay, I think we're about to leave the breakout room in about 50 seconds. So is there anything else anybody wants to say real fast or comment on real fast?
Thank you, Brian.
Yep, thank you.
All right, well, I appreciate everyone joining, and if you got any other questions or comments or anything, I think you can go to the website, and I think they're going to cover that in a little summary real fast. Isn't that right, Steve?
Yeah, we're going to all 6 groups will kind of report out on what they heard and be able to even ask questions if we need to of some of the other experts that'll be in the room at that point. So,
all right.
Great.
Well, I'll see everyone there.
Okay.
All right. Great. Thank you.